They mocked her Earth bracelet, until Instructor went silent like he'd seen that symbol in a nightmare. Its curved walls rose high like the inside of a vast shell, layered with glowing panels that displayed star maps, alien scripts, and rotating holograms of distant worlds. Hundreds of cadets filled the tiered seats, their bodies different in shape, color, and size, but all wearing the same academy uniform that marked them as the future leaders of the galaxy. In the middle rows sat a human girl named Myra Hale. She was small compared to many of the others. Some cadets had 4 arms, some had scales, some towered nearly twice her height. Myra's brown hair was tied back neatly, and her face was calm, almost unreadable. She sat straight, hands folded on the desk in front of her, listening quietly as if she were invisible. On her left wrist was a bracelet. It was simple, made of dark metal that did not shine under the hall's lights. Thin lines were carved into its surface, forming a symbol that looked old, deliberate, and unfamiliar. It was not decorative in the way alien jewelry often was. It had no gems, no colors, no moving parts. It looked serious. Across the row, a group of cadets noticed it. One of them leaned closer, his long fingers tapping the edge of Myra's desk. He was tall and narrow, his skin a pale blue that shimmered faintly. His eyes narrowed with curiosity that quickly turned into amusement. "Hey," he said loudly, making sure others could hear. "What's that thing on your arm?" Myra glanced at him, then down at her wrist. She did not pull it away. "It's a bracelet," she said simply. The cadet let out a short laugh. "I can see that. I mean, what kind of world makes something so plain?" A few others nearby leaned in. One of them, a creature with ridged skin and glowing eyes, chuckled. "Is that Earth fashion? I heard humans like old, broken things." More laughter followed. Myra did not react. Her expression stayed neutral, but she slowly tugged her sleeve down, covering the bracelet. The motion was calm, careful, as if she were protecting something fragile rather than hiding it. At the front of the hall, the instructor activated the main display. He was an older being, his species known for their sharp minds and sharp tongues. His voice carried easily through the room. "Today," he said, "we continue our study of lesser-developed civilizations." The words alone drew more smirks from the cadets. "Our focus," the instructor continued, "is Earth, a planet rich in resources but plagued by internal conflict. Humans are emotionally driven, technologically uneven, and historically violent, a classic example of a species that survived despite itself." A hologram of Earth appeared above him, spinning slowly. The continents glowed softly, surrounded by data points and timelines. The instructor glanced briefly in Myra's direction, his eyes lingering just long enough to show mild amusement. "We are fortunate to have a human cadet with us. A living artifact, you might say." Laughter echoed through the hall again, louder this time. Myra's jaw tightened slightly, but she kept her eyes forward. She had heard this before, on the shuttle, in the dorms, in other classes. Humans were always the example of what not to be. The instructor went on. "Earth never held a central galactic power, no great empire. No lasting influence. Their symbols, their myths, their so-called heroes, none of it left a mark worth remembering." As he spoke, the cadet who had mocked Myra earlier leaned back in his seat. "Guess that explains the bracelet," he muttered. "A souvenir from a failed world." More quiet laughter followed. Myra's fingers curled slightly against the desk. Her thoughts drifted, not to anger, but to memory. She remembered her grandfather's voice, low and steady, as he clasped the bracelet around her wrist years ago. He had not smiled when he gave it to her. He had looked serious, almost sad. "Don't show it to everyone," he had said. "Not because it's dangerous, because most of them won't understand." She had asked him what it meant. He had only said, "It means we survived." The instructor tapped a control, and the hologram shifted to show images of early Earth weapons, conflicts, and wars. The tone of the room became smug, satisfied. "Humans," he said, "believed strength came from destruction. They fought each other endlessly. They nearly destroyed their own planet more than once. If not for external intervention and strict observation treaties, Earth might not even exist today." Myra's eyes flicked up at that. External intervention. That was not how the stories were told back home. But she said nothing. The instructor paced slowly. "Fortunately for the galaxy, humans never advanced far enough to threaten interstellar stability." At that moment, Myra adjusted her sleeve again, just a little, enough for the edge of the bracelet to show. The dark metal caught the light. The instructor stopped mid-step. His eyes locked onto Myra's wrist. For a heartbeat, the entire hall was silent. The instructor did not blink. His confident posture stiffened and the color drained subtly from his face. He took a slow step closer to the edge of the platform, squinting as if his eyes were playing a trick on him. "That," he murmured, barely audible. The cadets noticed the change immediately. Murmurs spread through the hall as they followed his gaze. Some leaned forward. Others looked at Myra again, really looked this time. The instructor swallowed. He zoomed the display in, pretending to adjust the lesson, but his attention never left the symbol now visible on Myra's wrist. His hand trembled slightly as he gripped the control panel. "That symbol," he said slowly, choosing his words with care. "Where did you get it?" All eyes turned to Myra. She felt the weight of hundreds of stares, curious now rather than mocking. She met the instructor's gaze calmly. "My family," she said. "It's from Earth." The instructor's breathing quickened. His mind raced, memories surfacing that he had hoped were buried forever. Old briefings, redacted files, warnings delivered in quiet rooms by officials who did not like to repeat themselves. He straightened abruptly. "Class dismissed," he said. The words echoed like a shockwave. The cadets froze. Early dismissal was unheard of, especially in a core history course. "But," one cadet began. "Dismissed," the instructor repeated sharply. "Now." Confusion erupted as students gathered their things, whispering excitedly. As they filed out, many glanced at Myra with new expressions, uneasy, curious, uncertain. Myra remained seated until the hall was nearly empty. The instructor waited, watching her like one might watch an unexploded device. When the doors finally closed, sealing them inside the quiet hall, he spoke again, his voice low. "You should not wear that openly," he said. Myra stood slowly. "Why?" The instructor hesitated. For the first time since she had met him, he did not seem superior. He seemed afraid. "Because," he said, "some symbols are not forgotten, they are buried." Myra looked down at the bracelet, then back up at him. Her voice was steady. "On Earth," she said, "we remember them." The instructor said nothing. The silence between them was heavy, filled with things unsaid and histories long denied. Myra turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing softly. She did not look back. Behind her, the instructor remained frozen, staring at the symbol that should not have existed, and praying that the galaxy would never have to learn what it truly meant. Part 1 ends here. The corridors of the Orion Interstellar Academy felt different after that day. The lights were the same, the walls still hummed softly with energy, and cadets still moved in groups between classes. Yet something invisible had shifted. Whispers followed Myra Hale wherever she walked. She felt them before she heard them. "She's the human." The bracelet rested openly against her skin, dark and quiet, as if it had always been waiting for this moment. In her dorm room that night, Myra sat alone on the edge of her bed. The room was small and plain, assigned to off-world students who were not expected to stay long. A single window showed the endless stars outside the station, cold and distant. She turned her wrist slowly, tracing the carved lines of the symbol with her thumb. "You said this might happen," she whispered. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. Not in words, but in feeling, a warning mixed with pride. The next morning, the academy buzzed with controlled chaos. Instructors moved quickly, their conversations short and hushed. Security drones hovered longer than usual at intersections. A notice flashed across student displays, announcing schedule adjustments and restricted areas. Myra's next class was Galactic Conflict History. As she entered the lecture hall, the talking stopped. This time, no one laughed. Cadets watched her carefully as she took her seat. Some looked uncomfortable, others looked afraid. A few looked curious in a way that was new and sharp. The instructor for this class was different from the last, younger, calmer. But when his eyes fell on Myra's bracelet, his steps faltered for just a second. He recovered quickly, too quickly. "Open your tablets," he said. "Today we discuss unresolved conflicts." The lesson began as normal, but Myra noticed the changes. Certain topics were skipped. Some slides flickered away before fully loading. Names were replaced with blank spaces. History was being edited in real time. Halfway through the class, a message appeared on Myra's screen. "Report to Administrative Hall, Level 7. Immediately, no explanation. She stood, feeling hundreds of eyes follow her again, and left without a word. Level 7 was rarely used. It was where decisions were made quietly, far from students and visitors. The doors were thick, the lights dimmer. The air felt heavier. Two security officers stood outside the chamber. They were not hostile, but they were tense. "She's clear," one said after scanning her. The doors opened. Inside, a long table stretched across the room. Around it sat beings of different species, each wearing the insignia of Academy authority. At the far end sat the instructor from the previous day. He looked tired. Older Myra stopped a few steps inside. She did not bow, she did not sit. "You asked to see me," she said. One of the administrators leaned forward. "You caused a disruption." Myra met his gaze. "I sat in class." "The symbol you wear," another said, her voice sharp, "is not permitted." Myra looked at her wrist. "It's personal." The room grew quiet. The older instructor finally spoke. "Do you know what that symbol is?" "Yes," Myra said. A ripple of unease passed through the room. "Then you know why it alarms us," he said. Myra shook her head slightly. "No, I know why it scares you." Silence fell again, thicker this time. The administrator at the center folded his hands. "That symbol appears in sealed records, records tied to extinction-level events. Entire fleets lost, civilizations erased." Myra listened without interrupting. "It is associated," he continued carefully, "with a species that fought without mercy, that adapted faster than prediction models allowed, that refused surrender yet offered it to others." Myra's voice was quiet but firm. "You're describing us like monsters." The administrator hesitated. "We are describing history." Myra took a step forward. "Then tell it correctly." The older instructor looked away. "You labeled Earth as primitive," Myra said. "You teach that we were stopped before we became dangerous. That is not true." A few administrators shifted uncomfortably. "We stopped ourselves," Myra continued, "because we learned something you never did." "And what was that?" someone asked. Myra lifted her wrist slightly. "That winning does not always mean conquering." The room stirred. The older instructor finally looked up. "That symbol," he said slowly, "was worn by human units during the Quiet Wars." Myra nodded. "The wars the galaxy denies ever happened," he added. "Because you lost," Myra said without anger. The word hung in the air. One administrator slammed a hand on the table. "That is enough." "No," Myra said, "it's not." She took a breath, steadying herself. "Humans were not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most advanced. But when threatened, we adapted. When cornered, we endured. When pushed too far, we finished fights others started." The room was silent. "We saw what we could become," she continued. "And we chose to stop. We dismantled our fleets. We buried our symbols. We agreed to be small." The older instructor's voice was barely a whisper. "To protect us," Myra nodded, "and ourselves." Another administrator spoke, softer now. "Then why wear it now?" Myra looked around the table. "Because you forgot." She lowered her hand. "And because forgetting makes you careless." The meeting ended without punishment, without apology. Myra was dismissed with stiff politeness and careful eyes watching her leave. By the time she returned to the dormitory levels, the Academy network was already changing. Old files vanished. New restrictions appeared. Mentions of Earth quietly disappeared from public databases, but rumors spread faster than censorship. Cadets began to approach Myra, not in groups. One by one, some asked questions, some just stared. A few said nothing at all, simply nodding in a way that carried respect. One evening, the blue-skinned cadet who had mocked her first found her near the observation deck. "I didn't know," he said awkwardly. Myra looked at him. "You weren't supposed to." He hesitated. "Are humans angry?" Myra thought of Earth, of oceans and cities and quiet graves. "No," she said. "We're careful." He swallowed. As Myra turned back to the stars, far above the Academy, unseen by its leaders, dormant systems began to wake. Old signals stirred. Long silent watchers noticed the shift. Earth had remained quiet for a long time, but not asleep. And the galaxy was beginning to remember why. The first sign that something was wrong did not come as an alarm. It came as silence. The Orion Interstellar Academy was never truly quiet. Even during rest hours, the station hummed with energy. Systems whispered to each other. Distant engines pulsed. Communication traffic flowed like a living thing. Then, one night, that flow stuttered. Myra felt it before anyone announced it. She woke suddenly in her dorm room, heart steady but alert, as if an old instinct had been gently tapped awake. The lights were still on. The stars outside the window looked the same, yet something in the air felt paused. Moments later, a low tone echoed through the corridors, not loud, not urgent, just enough to tell trained minds that systems were shifting. Myra stood and slipped on her boots. She did not rush. She did not panic. She checked her wrist. The bracelet felt warm. In the control sectors of the academy, instructors and administrators crowded around holographic displays. Data streams flickered, then stabilized, then flickered again. Unidentified signal detected, one technician said. Origin? Another asked. Unknown, came the reply. Not on standard approach vectors, not using recognized channels. The older instructor from Myra's class stood near the back, arms crossed tightly. His expression was grim. Are they broadcasting? An administrator asked. Yes, the technician said slowly. But it's not a message, it's more like a presence. Across the station, cadets were ordered to remain in their quarters, doors sealed softly but firmly. Security drones increased patrols. Myra received the order like everyone else. She ignored it. She moved through the corridors with purpose, her steps calm. No one stopped her. Not because she was invisible, but because those who saw her hesitated. The rumors had grown. The bracelet was no longer just jewelry. It was a question no one wanted to ask out loud. She reached an observation deck overlooking open space. There the stars shifted. At first it looked like a distortion, as if space itself were bending. Then shapes emerged. Massive, angular, cold ships. They were not sleek like most galactic vessels. They looked older, heavier, built for endurance rather than speed. Their hulls were marked with symbols no one used anymore, except one. A nearby display activated automatically, trying to identify the incoming fleet. Red warnings pulsed. Unknown faction, no registry. No diplomatic clearance. Behind Myra, footsteps approached. The blue-skinned cadet stopped a few steps away. His face was pale. Those ships, he said quietly. They're not ours. Myra nodded. No, are they? He stopped himself. Are they here for you? Myra did not answer immediately. She watched the ships settle into a loose formation, not aggressive but unmistakably dominant. They're here because someone noticed Earth again, she said. The station's main alarm finally sounded. This time it was loud. In the command chamber, panic threatened to take hold. Administrators shouted over one another. Defense systems were brought online. Messages were prepared, rewritten, deleted. No response from them, a technician said. They're ignoring all hails. The older instructor closed his eyes briefly. They're not here to talk, he said. Then what do they want? Someone demanded. Before he could answer, a new signal appeared. This one was different, clean, simple. It bypassed public channels and locked directly onto the Academy's core systems. A single image filled every screen. A symbol, the same one carved into Myra's bracelet. The room went completely still. They found us, an administrator whispered. At that exact moment, Myra's communicator chimed. A private channel opened without her touching it. Myra Hale, a voice said. It was calm, human, familiar in a way that reached deep. Yes, Myra replied. You should not be there, the voice said gently. I know, she said. But I am. A pause followed. Then we felt the signal. The bracelet was never meant to activate. They were already watching, Myra said. The Academy made noise. Another pause, longer this time. We will handle it, the voice said. Myra's fingers tightened slightly. No, she said. Let me. In the command chamber, the administrators watched as a single human figure appeared on the main display. Myra stood on the observation deck, stars and massive ships behind her. She raised her wrist. The bracelet pulsed once. Across the fleet, systems responded. The ships did not move closer. They did not power weapons. They simply waited. The older instructor's voice shook. She's not calling them, he said. She's answering them. Myra spoke clearly, her voice carried across channels old and new. This is Myra Hale of Earth, she said. Stand down. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then the human voice returned, now audible to everyone. Myra, it said, you are not authorized. I am wearing the mark, she replied. That makes me responsible. Silence stretched. Then slowly, one of the massive ships altered its orientation, not toward the station, but away from it. Others followed. Relief rippled through the command chamber, but Myra did not relax. They're not attacking, she said quietly. They're warning. The administrator nearest the display leaned forward. Warning us of what? Myra lowered her hand. Of fear. The human voice spoke again. The galaxy is stirring, it said. Old enemies notice the records changing, Earth being erased again, or revealed. We chose restraint, Myra said. We still do. Yes, the voice agreed, but others may not. In the distance, another signal flickered briefly at the edge of detection. Not human, not friendly. The fleet adjusted, forming a wider defensive arc. Myra turned back toward the academy, her face reflected in the glass. For the first time, her comm showed cracks, not fear but weight. Behind her, the blue-skinned cadet spoke softly. "You could have destroyed us." Myra looked at him. "We never wanted to." The human voice softened. "Myra, it is time to come home." She shook her head. "Not yet." "Why?" the voice asked. She looked at the station, at the people watching her now, not as a curiosity, but as a shield. "Because they need to understand," she said. "Humans are not their nightmare." A pause. "We are the reason they get to wake up from one." The human ships began to withdraw, slowly, carefully, leaving behind silence and awe instead of fire. Across the academy, systems stabilized. Alarms faded, doors unlocked. In the command chamber, no one spoke. The older instructor finally bowed his head. Far from the station, beyond charts and treaties, other forces had noticed the exchange. They had seen the symbol. They had felt the response. Earth had spoken without shouting. And that, to those who remembered, was the most dangerous sound of all. Myra stood alone on the observation deck as the stars returned to their normal patterns. The bracelet cooled against her skin. This was not the end. It was the moment the galaxy realized humanity was still watching. The Academy did not return to normal after the human fleet left. On the surface, everything worked as before. Classes resumed. Lights stayed bright. Shuttles arrived and departed on schedule. But beneath that order, something had changed, and everyone could feel it. Myra Hale became the quiet center of that change. She was no longer ignored. Cadets stepped aside when she passed, not out of fear, but respect mixed with uncertainty. Some nodded to her. Others avoided her eyes. A few watched her with open curiosity, as if trying to understand how someone so calm could stand between worlds and fleets. Myra did not change her routine. She attended her classes. She studied. She walked the observation decks at night. The bracelet remained visible on her wrist, no longer hidden. Instructors changed their lessons. History courses began to include words like sealed conflicts and unrecorded resolutions. Earth was no longer called primitive. Instead, it was described as reserved and deliberately quiet. No one laughed anymore when its name appeared. The older instructor requested a private meeting. Myra agreed. They met in a small room overlooking space. The stars drifted slowly past the wide window, silent and endless. The instructor stood stiffly at first, unsure how to begin. "I owe you an apology," he said at last. Myra listened. "I mocked what I did not understand," he continued. "I taught lies because they were easier than fear." Myra nodded once. "Fear makes people careless." "Yes," he said quietly, "and you stopped us from making a terrible mistake." She looked out at the stars. "Humans have made many," she said. "That's why we learned to stop." He hesitated, then asked the question he had carried since the first day. "Why did your people choose silence instead of rule?" Myra thought of Earth, of blue oceans and crowded cities, of wars remembered in stories and names carved into stone. "Because ruling means deciding who suffers," she said. "We didn't want that power anymore." The instructor bowed his head slightly. "The galaxy may not deserve such mercy." Myra's voice was calm. "That's why it needs it." Word of the event spread far beyond the academy. Carefully at first, then faster. Other institutions requested access to sealed archives. Old treaties were reviewed. Forgotten warnings were reread. Some species reacted with relief, others reacted with fear. Far from Orion's space, in regions where the human fleet's signal had been noticed, movements began. Old rivals remembered losses they had never fully understood. New powers saw opportunity. Earth noticed all of it, but Earth did not rush. Myra received one final message late one night as she stood alone at the observation deck. "You did well," the familiar human voice said. "I only told the truth," she replied. "That is harder than fighting," the voice said. "You have given them a choice." "What choice?" Myra asked. "To treat humans as monsters," the voice said, "or as neighbors." Myra looked down at her bracelet. "And if they choose wrong," there was a pause. "Then we will remind them," the voice said gently, "why we chose mercy in the first place." The channel closed. Days later, the Academy held a formal assembly, not a lecture, not a ceremony, something new. Myra stood among the cadets, not separated, not elevated. The administrators spoke carefully, announcing revisions to galactic history standards. Acknowledgement of sealed conflicts. Recognition of Earth's voluntary withdrawal from expansion. No cheers followed. Instead, there was silence. heavy, thoughtful silence. When the assembly ended, the blue-skinned cadet approached Myra one last time. "Will you leave?" he asked. "Eventually," she said. "Will humans come back to the galaxy?" he asked. Myra smiled slightly. "We never left." She walked past him toward the exit, sunlight from a nearby star casting long shadows across the floor. As she reached the doors, an announcement echoed softly through the hall. Not an alarm, not a warning. A simple update, galactic records synchronized, Earth status revised, not primitive, not extinct, not forgotten, active, observant, restrained. Myra stepped out into the corridor, her footsteps steady. She was only one human carrying a small, dark bracelet. But across the stars, entire civilizations adjusted their behavior, because humanity had shown them something rare. Power that did not need to shout. Strength that chose restraint. A nightmare that decided to become a guardian instead. And the galaxy understood at last that the most dangerous thing about humans was not what they could destroy. It was what they chose not to.